you don't have to have that fancy red room to explore kink. You can explore kink in your kitchen if you wanted to. Like, it really doesn't have to be anything elaborate. You don't have to have these formal scenes planned. It can be off the cuff. It can be just fun. It doesn't even have to involve pain if you don't want it to. And so the nuance is there. I think kink is about as diverse as the people in it. There's lots of different ways to practice kink. There's no one right way. There's no one true way. So you can really make it whatever you want it to be.
Hey, welcome to Meet Me at the Spot, where pleasure meets education. This is the space where we get real about sex, relationships, and everything in between. I'm your host, Holly Eckelberger, and I'm a longtime sexual health educator, activist, and content creator. I will be your guide through conversations that blend curiosity, pleasure, and truth. Together with some amazing guests, we'll break down stigma, celebrate bodies, and learn how to embrace sexual health with confidence and joy. So get comfy because it's time for the show to get started. Welcome, Lilith, to the podcast. I'm really excited to have you here.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So, a question I always ask folks to get started because I'm nosy. That's why I started a podcast. What kind of got you started into the work that you do?
So I was always the friend that everybody went to with questions about sex. I grew up in Texas, and so there was no sex education at all. So I had to kind of be this self-taught person. And I worked in marketing for like a decade, and I was happy. And then I just found myself like in the kink community, I found myself becoming more of like an educator in that space. And I decided that I really wanted to do this right. I wanted to learn how to teach. So I discovered ASECT, the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. And so I decided to get certified. Then I decided to completely leave my marketing role and become a sexologist and teach sexuality and inclusion and all that good stuff. So yeah, and I'm here now. I'm currently in a master's program for public health. So I'm kind of coming at it from that angle now too.
That's awesome. As a fellow member of the Masters of Public Health world, I love to see people get their
Nice.
masters in public health. It makes me so happy. Like people who have degrees in public health, I'm like, yay! Especially people who focus on sexual health because I think that's such like a unique perspective. I know when I was doing my program, like I related everything back to sexual health. Like all my classes were like, "Oh, I'm taking this climate change class. Let's talk about climate change and sexual health." Like
I
my
love it.
professors were sick of me. But no, they're like, "That's actually really cool. I never thought about that." I'm like, I know, that's why I'm here. I love asking this question. And I say this all the time on the show because all of us who do this work come from such different reasons, like what brought us here. And so it's always
Yeah.
fascinating to me to see like the things that bring everybody to like this kind of the space because it's so different and what we all do is so very different from each other, even when we do similar stuff it's so very different. And one of the reasons I truly love what you do, and why I was like, I have to have you on, is you post a lot of cool stuff on social media. And you talk about one of my favorite topics to talk about with other people because I recognize I'm not an expert in this topic, which is especially around kink spaces. And
Yeah.
so I love to learn about like kind of what brings folks like into kink spaces. Like, I mean, you don't just, I assume you don't just wake up one day and be like, you know what? Let me check out. But maybe you do. I don't know.
Some people do. Some people
Yeah,
totally
yeah,
do.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So what kind of brings people to kink spaces? So a lot of
Yeah.
different things. The one kind of consistent thing I've found is typically people in established relationships will start to kind of explore more things in the bedroom and they discover, oh, well, maybe I can use a flogger, maybe I can use a paddle. And then they start to discover other things they can do. And it kind of opens Pandora's box, so to speak. kink. But then there's also people who are neurodivergent who are seeking kind of that like novelty experience, and you definitely get that with kink. So you also have that perspective. Lots of people who are already in the swinger community tend to kind of bleed over into kink as well. So lots of different lifestyles and everything kind of coming together.
Yeah. That's that's actually a really cool perspective that you brought, like, so many different kinds of folks in so many different kinds of points in their life, but relationship statuses, for example. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I would never really think, people who are in a couple, but then I'm like, "Yeah, wait, that makes sense." And I think because a lot of times in my own brain and my own biases, I'm like, when I think kink, I'm like, it's gotta be in a different location, like in a dungeon space or like in some kind of room, Um,
Yeah.
I my TikTok feed is showing me like clips from 50 Shades of Grey from the movie. And so I'm
Mhm.
like, it has to be like the Red Room of Pain, you know? It has to be like this, but that's not that I mean, that's part for some people, right? Um,
Yeah.
but can you talk a little bit about like maybe some of the nuances around kink?
Yeah, well, backtracking a little bit, speaking of 50
Mhm.
Shades, the other perspective of people that come into kink will see something like 50 Shades or Story of O or any of those, and it inspires them to explore kink. So you've also got those folks. Now, and you wanted me to talk about like the nuances of kink and
Yeah.
all of that. Yeah, so you don't have to have that fancy red room to explore kink. You can explore kink in your kitchen if you wanted to. Like, it really doesn't have to be anything elaborate. You don't have to have these formal scenes planned. It can be off the cuff. It can be just fun. It doesn't even have to involve pain if you don't want it to. And so the nuances there, I think, is kink is about as diverse as the people in it. There's lots of different ways to practice kink. There's no one right way. There's no one true way. So you can really make it whatever you want it to be. You don't have to play with power if you don't want to. If you don't want to do the dom
Mhm.
sub thing, you don't have to. You can be a solo practitioner. You can just play with friends. You don't even have to be in a relationship with them. So lots of different things there, and yeah, it's about as diverse as you make it.
That's a really great perspective, I think, especially for folks listening who may be like, "Kink is not for me," but it's like, it could be it could,
Yeah,
maybe it could be.
and you could argue that everybody's a little kinky.
Yeah! I've read somewhere one time that, like, when people refer to, like, vanilla sex, um, that can also be included in when you're talking about kinks for people, right?
Mhm.
And things like that. And I think if I'm remembering from what I read, this was a while ago, they were kind of comparing it to like the nuances around like asexual is asexuality, right? It's a form of
Yeah.
sexuality that people have that a lot of people don't think about it that way. Um, and I think sometimes what people describe as vanilla for one person is kinky compared to maybe another person, right? Like, because we're all into
Yeah, absolutely.
different things and what we, have learned about sex.
Yeah, and kink doesn't even have to be sexual, that's the other thing. Plenty of
Ooh.
asexual people are kinky and explore kink, and they're just as welcome as anyone else.
I'm learning so much. I'm like breaking my own stereotypes, like in the moment. I'm like, wait, but no. Oh, but maybe
I
you're
love it.
right. That's so smart. Um, you mentioned before around neurodivergency and kink and being in this space. And I'm hoping you can talk a little bit more and expand a little bit more on that and what that kind of looks like.
Yeah, so neurodivergent is not a medical term. It's actually a social term. And it's important to know that because it's not a diagnosis. It includes so many different people. You've got ADHD under that, autism, trauma falls under that, bipolar falls under that. Anything, basically, it's defined as any way in which the brain deviates from what is considered normal. Now, how do we define normal? Maybe it's how you contribute to capitalism, really, at the end of the day.
Mm.
So anything that deviates from that is considered neurodivergent. Anything that doesn't is considered neurotypical. So neurodivergent people by and large, but again, not everyone, typically need kind of explicit communication. Social cues may be a challenge. Some people need a routine. Some people don't need a routine, depending on what their diagnosis is. Some people need novelty, so they can't kind of have routine and boring things they consider boring, all the time. And so you often find, and a lot of studies right now are being done about this. I'm really excited to see the research when it comes out. But a lot of neurodivergent people tend to find themselves in kink. I have to remind myself that neurotypical kinksters also exist sometimes, because everybody's neurodivergent, at least in my experience. And I've traveled to other kink communities as well, and have seen that too. So yeah, there's lots of crossover there. And the opinion I have about that in terms of like why is again that novelty seeking. Kink is novelty at the end of the day. Communication is huge in kink. You can't ever assume consent. You have to explicitly discuss it. You have to explicitly discuss roles, what you consent to, what the relationship is between you and another person. All of that has to be explicitly laid out, which works really well with neurodivergent brains. Um, and yeah, and all those social like rules that we kind of have outside of kink don't really apply in kink. And so that's the other thing too, is neurodivergent people have trouble with those social cues, but they don't have to in kink because you explicitly discuss everything and you explicitly consent to everything that you want to. Yeah, so I see lots of crossovers.
That is so cool. Like my ADHD slash anxiety brain was like, so you're telling me I don't have to overanalyze and think about it for years to come? Like, did I do the right thing? Did I make the right move? Did I say something right? Because we talked about it, right? Like
Yeah.
we kind of laid out that in the beginning. We laid out those rules, and there's already kind of like these norms and rules kind of set up. And that obviously looks different for everybody depending on what they're into and what they're wanting and everything. That is so cool because my brain is like the amount of times that 20 years ago, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have done it that way. I shouldn't have should I have just left at this point?" Like, that stuff still plays in my mind. That is how my, like, anxious brain works. It still, like, replays all these moments and goes, "I don't even know the person's name anymore." Like, that's how bad it is. Like, I'm like, "I don't know. It was, like, a random
Yeah.
hookup." But, like, I'm still overanalyzing every piece of it. But that's that's really great that you brought that up, that in kink spaces, right? These things are laid out. And it's really helpful for someone who does not have a typical brain, which you were like, I have to remember that neurotypical people exist in kink spaces. And I was like, I have to sometimes remember that neurotypical people exist because I don't think I actually have interacted with someone who is quote unquote neurotypical. Um, I swear, like
Yeah.
the Venn diagram of people who especially work in this space and people who are neurodivergent in some
Oh
way
yeah.
is like a complete circle. And
Absolutely.
people with religious
Absolutely.
previous religious trauma adds right on into it. Um, it is like a beautiful diagram of a circle, and I think that's a really good point that you brought up. That I think a lot of people, myself included, I would have never made those kind of connections. So you said in the
Mhm.
beginning, you're like, yeah, neurodivergent people in kink spaces. I'm like, why? I don't, hang on, I have to ask this. What? So I'm really glad that you
Yeah.
explained it that way. I think that was really helpful to hear it.
I'm glad.
So, as somebody who, works in this space, one question I like to ask in like educational spaces is around a specific topic that like fires you up. Like if someone were to say, "Hey Lilith, I want you to come present on this topic." Whatever topic just makes you so excited. What's the topic?
Ooh. Honestly, it's the neurodivergence in kink,
Yeah.
and how to adapt kink to kind of suit your neurodivergent brain. Because a lot of people who are neurodivergent need to do aftercare in different ways. They need to negotiate consent in different ways. We have to adjust for, rejection sensitive dysphoria in certain scenarios. So I really love teaching about that, and just in general, like inclusion in kink. when it comes to like race and disability as well. So yeah, anything neurodivergent slash inclusion is my jam.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, I think one of the big pieces that um that is important and critical for kink, and I think should just be critical just in general, especially if you're talking about having any sort of like sexual interactions with someone, is that aftercare piece. It's such like an important and necessary component to kink, that I think people who are not part of like kink community, maybe not as familiar with that aftercare piece. Can you expand a little bit more when you talk about aftercare, what that kind of looks like?
Of course. So aftercare is essentially part of the scene. It's something you negotiate on what are we going to do after the scene ends? Like so say for example we're going to do a flogging scene. After I flogged you, what do we do? So the thing to keep in mind is there is a biological component that comes into the need for aftercare. Whenever you're doing kink and exploring sexuality, you've got all these hormones rushing, endorphins, adrenaline, all that stuff is coming up, up, up. The thing is, what comes up must come down. And so you want to slowly work down all of that, all those endorphins and everything rushing. Otherwise, you're going to crash. And that's called sub drop or dom drop or play drop.
Mm,
Basically, you feel really depressed. Some people get physically ill. It's just kind of a downward spiral a little bit. And so, what aftercare is what we do after the scene to kind of try to prevent sub drop. So it can be anything from like cuddling to if we need like, I like to have a protein snack. So like nuts or something, because maybe you've played for a long time, and so your body just needs that nourishment. You need water. You need. Some people get cold, so a blanket or socks is really helpful. Um, Depending on the type of scene you did, you may have specific kinds of aftercare. So, say, for example, if it was a needle scene, cleaning up and first aid would be part of your aftercare.
mhm.
Whereas, like flogging, you wouldn't necessarily need to do that. But yeah, it can also vary. Some people have sex for aftercare. So, that's always great too. But it's anything you consent to. So, you negotiate it as part of the scene as well. And one thing I have, it's a resource I have on my shop at shop.lilithfoxx.com. It's actually free. And it's a negotiation spreadsheet. So everything you want to talk about in kink, how you can negotiate it, all of that, it's on a spreadsheet. And I recommend using one of those if you ever want to start to negotiate kink.
Yeah, that's amazing. Again, that is like this is perfect for those neurodivergent folks, right? Like, I want a
Yeah.
spreadsheet. I want to be able to check things off, and I want to be able to like ha- do these things. I know in previous relationships with partners, like, there's lots of apps and stuff out there too where like you each individually fill out like this is a hell yes kind of activity. This is a I'm
Yeah.
willing to try it, and this is a absolutely never ever not interested kind of thing. And then you kind of compare your responses together and see like where we're at, like, and I have found that to be really helpful. Because communication is hard sometimes,
Yeah.
especially when you're getting into with someone new. You're like, how do I tell them I like this thing without them being like, oh my gosh, I'm out forever? Like, without scaring them
Yeah.
away. How do we ease into this conversation that I may be into things that your previous partners have never been into? And vice versa, like hearing that, right, from another partner, like they may be into something. And I'm like, wait, what? Oh, okay, hang on, I have to process that for a minute, right?
Yeah.
So I love that you include that, right, on your shop, and, we will link that in the show notes for sure for folks to check that out.
So spreadsheets can be really great for some neurodivergent brains, but other neurodivergent brains are like, hell no, why would you ever subject me to that? So I just wanted to say that you don't have to have a full spreadsheet. One of the things I recommend doing is having a not tonight list. So I do this for myself even. I will make a list of things that no matter what my horny ass says I want to do later in the evening, I just will not do tonight because there's always tomorrow. There's always tomorrow night, whatever it is. And so you can do that, or you can do a list of these are the things that I want to do. And it can be just a list of things that you've decided for yourself can work. You can do just verbal negotiations or even just a little checklist on your phone. It doesn't even have to be anything like super elaborate. I just have the checklist because on my spreadsheets, because I save every version of it. So I like, kind of track my kink journey throughout and I journal about it with that. So that's why I found it helpful. But yeah, you don't necessarily have to do that.
I love that you mentioned that. Because I was like, no, for me, that's so helpful. I want like a whole spreadsheet. I want like, I want this whole document. But I could see for
Mhm.
some folks, they're like, whoa, what?
Yeah, spreadsheets are for
um,
work. What are you doing?
right? Spreadsheets are for work, but there's also spreadsheets for fun, y'all.
Yeah,
But
sexy
yeah, but some people are
spreadsheets.
like, yes. I feel like that's got to be a podcast somewhere.
Yeah.
Sex and spreadsheets. Um, my mind just went to like a bunch of taglines about spreading. Okay, anyways. So oh Lord. No, but I think it's great to have like a not tonight, right? Like
Yeah.
it's easy to kind of get caught up in the moment when things are happening,
Yeah.
or when things are like ramping up and you're like, whatever, do whatever. But also, like, you don't have to complete an entire like checklist of things all in
Yeah.
one night, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Or ever. You can even just stick to like your top three things and have those be your things.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you mentioned that. And I always think that aftercare, when I first heard about this, especially in kink spaces, like why don't we do this like just all the time
Yeah.
with partners?
Yeah,
Well, like,
absolutely.
well, we're, whether we're just like, we're just gonna have sex or we're just gonna like engage or just try something, like, we don't talk about the aftercare. Like, how are we gonna take care of myself and one another? Like, how are we gonna take care of each other afterwards? But we don't talk about that
Mhm.
ahead of time, and it leaves a lot of questions afterwards and leaves sometimes people feeling some level of a drop, right? Like some level of like,
Yeah.
oh, I thought we were gonna cuddle, but you just want me to get my clothes on and bounce. Okay, got it, understood. Like, there's not like
Yeah.
these discussions that should be happening. So I'm always fascinated to hear about it. I'm like, we should just always be talking about it when we're putting ourselves in vulnerable situations, whatever that may look like.
I definitely agree. Yeah, you don't even have to do anything kinky to need aftercare. I think everybody needs it at some point or another, and talking about it and like what your needs are is super important.
Yeah, I agree. One of the other things you brought up, that I want to explore a little bit more is you talked around inclusion in kink spaces. And
Mhm.
I'd love to learn a little bit more about what you meant by that and what that looks like in your practice.
Yeah, so the unfortunate thing is that all the isms that we have in society, racism, sexism, ableism, all of those carry over into alternative sexuality communities and really any sub community, right? Subculture rather. And it's unfortunate. And the thing is whenever somebody is in a kink space, that is them at their most vulnerable. You are exploring a side of yourself, and everybody needs to feel at home in that space. But if you're subject to racism, even the microaggressions, right? Like
Hmm.
that's super problematic, and it can make people feel not at home in kink spaces. One example is a friend of mine. She's a black woman, and she does rope a lot. She does self tying, and she's just a beautiful person inside and out, and does amazing rope work. Somebody went up to her after an event and complimented her, but the way they did it is they said that the color of the rope looked beautiful on her skin tone. And, this person didn't mean it negatively, but the problem is now she feels like she's being fetishized. And it's something
Mm,
that initially was, an escape for her that she now has to kind of navigate this, not consenting to being fetishized about it.
mm.
Um, and so you see a lot of that. You see a lot of microaggressions. But what I've often found, and don't get me wrong, there's also some egregious, things of racism and whatnot that happen, unfortunately. But for the most part, in my experience, it's always been microaggressions that have been kind of the thing that happens often. And so whenever I teach inclusion and I do a lot of DEI negotiate, or excuse me, DEI consulting with kink organizations, is I talk about those microaggressions, how they show up, what are the things that you can do to hold yourself accountable if you do something like that.
Mm.
And so it's a lot of talks about accountability, a lot of talks about just getting to know other people and their cultural experiences. So, yeah, just in general, kind of expanding your mind in that way.
Thank you for explaining that a little bit more. Yeah, I mean, of course, all of the isms in in our society don't just all magically go away. Like this magical,
Yeah.
like invisible wall that just as soon as you kind of like step into a kink space, it just goes away. And I think a lot of folks are unaware of microaggressions, especially when they're doing them, right? Like
Hmm.
I I feel that a lot of folks, um, their intention is coming from a good place, right? Like they are intending
Absolutely.
like that as a compliment, right? Like the example that you gave with your friend, right? Like I- I always like to assume like good intentions in all people or at least most people. But
Yeah.
one of the things that I know I always talk about in education spaces is assume good intentions and we explore the impact, right? Because that's the important piece is the impact. Um, and it's one thing to be like, no, but I didn't mean it that way. And that's okay. Understood. And you need to understand the impact, your
Yeah.
intention, whether it was, you were trying to be intentional or unintentional. That's the least important part of the situation. This is
Yeah.
now with the impact, right? Because the impact lasts longer than that person, microaggressing someone, right? Like they made that
Yeah.
comment. Your friend was like, "Oh, okay." And that person went on with their day and may have, been like, "Oh my gosh," told their friends what a great experience and never thought about it. But now we have the impact part where your friend is like, "Now I have to like think about all of the ways that I move in this space where I didn't think about that before." Where I
Yeah,
wasn't thinking about it in that
absolutely.
way before, right? Um, and so I love that you do that DEI work within the kink space. And I think that's really so necessary. It's so, so important in the sexual
Mhm.
health space and definitely in the kink space. And it's something I never knew somebody did that. That's like really cool.
Thank you. I have in my on my website, lilithfoxx.com, I have a racism accessibility hub where it's just a Notion page, and it's got all sorts of resources on racism, and I've got one on disability as well. And so yeah, those are free as well. For microaggressions, there's one link on there is the micropedia of microaggressions, and it's just
Mm.
an encyclopedia of every microaggression you can think of. And it tells you why it's wrong, in what way it's used, all of that. So I often will go there. But like you said, the impact is the most important thing and understanding that. So don't be afraid to make a mistake because the reality is you
Mhm.
will make one. You're going to offend somebody, you're going to hurt somebody. That's going to happen. But how you hold yourself accountable afterward is the key, because we're all racist. We all are. It's a spectrum. And so it's a matter of unlearning and holding ourselves accountable and continuing to learn and grow.
Yeah, I think that accountability piece that you mentioned is so important. I have worked in a lot of previous jobs, um, you know, teaching folks about LGBTQ plus like terminology and all of these things. And people are like, well, I'm afraid to say the wrong thing. It's like, it's okay. You're going to say the wrong thing. I have been doing this work for almost 20 years. I have 2 master's degrees. I am of the community. And sometimes I still make mistakes, right? Like
Yeah.
they're going to happen. The goal is not to be perfect all of the time. That's because that's unattainable. That's just not realistic. The goal is to just try to learn and grow and do your best and recognize when you do make that mistake or that error or that misstep, you say the wrong thing, that you take that accountability and continue learning. You should always be learning all of the time.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that is also really great that you offer a lot of these resources on your website as well. And I'm like, I'm going to be checking out your website for the rest of tonight. And especially the micropedia of microaggressions that you talked about. I think that one is key. So I think a lot of people they don't recognize it because it's coming from what they believe is a good place in their heart.
Yeah, absolute. And
Uh,
it's the little ways that we can be inclusive. Like I also have resources for finding inclusive stock photos. So, think about the social media images you share. Think about what's on your website. Is it all white people? Is it all able-bodied people? Those are things to keep in mind. And yeah, so I've got resources there. It's a huge list. It's a labor of love that I put it together. So definitely check it out. It's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and like I said before, we will definitely be putting that down in the show notes for sure on that. I am in love with this conversation so much. I want to know yeah, I'm like learning so much. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, having my own personal class." Uh around like content creation and being, kind of I think a lot of folks moving into digital spaces, especially when COVID happened. What has been your experience being like in the content creation space and the online space in the work that you do?
Yeah, this is actually when I get to put my marketing hat on a little bit. Um, Content creation honestly never ends. I'm not great with social media, so my social media is pretty sparse, and especially now that I'm in school, so I'm not really doing it all too much. If you want like an active social media presence that teaches amazing Sex Ed Princess and
Mhm.
Sex Ed Files, are two amazing educators, and
Yeah.
so they're really great with social media. But I'm not. That said, in terms of creating content, I love creating classes. I love creating kind of digital printables, things like that, like my spreadsheet for negotiation. Um, I try to make like little infographics. But in general, oh, and I do blogs on my website as well, 2 times a month. So yeah, I would say in general, my content creation tends to lean more toward like creating classes, writing blogs, things like that. Yeah, I'm not the social media wizard. I'm better at marketing other people than I am myself. So that's the thing.
Oh my gosh, that's the truth I see. I see so many other people's like social media stuff. I'm like, oh, that's so cool. I'm sharing that, sharing that, sharing that. When it comes to like marketing my own stuff, I'm like, hey guys, like if you want to check this thing out, that'd be cool. That'd be awesome. Otherwise, I'm sharing other people's stuff. I'm like, look at this amazing human right here. Like
Yeah,
I think it's so weird to market yourself. I think it
it
is.
is.
I find it very uncomfortable because I'm like, especially as a woman in society, like I have been conditioned
Mhm.
and in general, we have been conditioned to not talk about ourselves because then we
Yeah,
seem very, stuck up and, that we're full of ourselves and all this stuff. Um, but that is when you kind of run your own business and run your own shit. Like you have to be your
you have
own
to.
you have to be, and it's wild to do it, and then it's also wild because talking about sex on the internet is so censored. Um,
Yeah.
and the amount of like, content violations that I receive is wild. They're like, "Are you sure
Yeah.
you wanna post this? People who have posted similar things have gotten their stuff flagged." I'm like, "I don't care, post it." People are like, "Why don't you guys just say the words?" Like, so many people now are like, "Why don't you guys just say the words?" It's like, because we can't, because the internet won't let us say the words
Yeah.
we wanna say. So we've had to be creative in the way we talk about this stuff, and it's dumb.
Yeah.
Like, it's dumb. So not
It
only do we have
is.
to, like, do what we actually wanna do, right? How whatever that looks like on the internet. We wanna make our courses, we want to, make, cool posts, whatever that looks like, and we have to market ourselves, and we have to do it in a way that, like, the algorithm will like us today in this moment, which changes by
Yeah.
the minute. It's a lot that a lot of I feel like other content, specific or area specific, whatever, folks don't always have to think about all of those things in that way that we do.
Yeah, I completely agree. Any of the, like, vanilla, businesses, like, they're just doing fine. They don't have to worry about it at all. I really don't know how Jill and, Mariah do it. Those are the 2
No.
social media people I mentioned. No idea
Yes.
how they do it. It's really impressive. I think they both have upwards of 50 or 60,000 followers or more.
Yeah. Jill has been on an Yeah, Jill has been a guest on this podcast, and
Oh,
I've
I
been
love Jill.
following Mariah is like, I love her stuff. I'm, like, obsessed with her stuff. She's amazing. Both of them, like, they do it in such a cool way. Like, they put out
Yeah.
content on a regular basis in such a way that I'm like, "Yeah, get it. I will share that. That's amazing. I don't know how you thought of that, where your brain goes. It's amazing." I always like to ask my guests as we wrap up to share, if you would, one piece of advice that you have for the listeners.
Don't be afraid to explore. I know that sounds so vague and broad, but like, don't be afraid to explore kink or don't explore kink. Don't be afraid to try new things. There's always tomorrow. There's always next time. So I would say just explore, have fun with it.
Yeah, I love that. That's such great advice. You're like, this seems so general, but it's really helpful. Like,
It works. Yeah,
just yeah,
absolutely.
do what works for you. Absolutely. And in the show notes, like I said several times, we'll have a link to your website and ways for folks to follow you and to support the
Great.
work that you do. But a huge, huge thank you so much for being on and for chatting. It was so lovely getting to know you and getting to know a little bit about the work that you do.
Thank you so much. Likewise, I really loved being on the show. It was a lot of fun. Definitely looking forward to hearing more and learning more.